Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about Bannerlord's siege defence. There are a few tricks involved here right from the very off when you first have to defend your castle. Now usually you'll be outside the castle, you'll get a message it's under siege and you'll have to get there in a hurry and break through the siege line. So that's where we start. If you're already in the castle, then you'll save yourself a lot of men. But first thing you do is break through the siege lines with your men. You're going to lose some men here, but that's fine. That is fine. You can defeat 3-1 odds sometimes if you're lucky and everything works in your favour. Certainly beat, double the odds. Now what you want to do is you want to get to the point where your siege engines are still firing, but theirs are not when the siege begins. So your siege engines need to have destroyed his siege engines before the siege begins. If they do, then the siege is much easier for you to deal with. So we'll start from that point on. Once that's done and the sieges start ready to go, that's when you actually start having the fun. Next thing is the deployment phase. Now in the deployment phase, you've got to place your men. Now there's a trick here, right? It says the artillery is already going to be there. I tend to click auto deploy to get some men in basic positions, then I move them around a little bit. But generally speaking, I'll create a number of squads that I need to place throughout the battlements. So if like for instance, I wouldn't just have one squad of soldiers. I'd have like 3 or 4 of them, and I'd place them in strategic positions around the castle where I want them to be when the game starts. The same with the archers. That way, as you'll see from the video, when the game starts, they're exactly where they need to be. With soldiers, you push them right up against the battlements, so when the enemy comes up the ladder, they fall in the middle of your men. At that point on, they get hacked to pieces. And when you're placing men in front of the main gate, when the gate goes down, that's a death trap for attackers. If you've got the right men in front of the gate, then they'll just come at the wall of swords and die as they approach. I haven't really won a siege battle attacking through the main gate yet. It's always proved to be a death trap, so I tend not to build battering rams if I can help it unless I'm forced to. Now if you actually notice on the video, you'll notice there's various catapults and things. This is an upgrade you make to your castles and stuff. If you want to build these fast, you have to take workshop and things like that. The upgrades workshop and siege defense, or the siege options as well. That way your walls are repaired quicker, your siege engines are built faster, that kind of thing. This is where the planning comes in right at the beginning of the game. You get that right, this stage goes quite smoothly and you haven't got a problem. You get it wrong and you mess up. But anyway, the idea is the men come up the ladders, straight into your men, get hacked to pieces, or your archers in a position to shoot down at them. And as for the main gate, your men are in the main gate, ready for when that gate goes down. But there are other strategies involved with the main gate, as you will see in a minute. Now when the game first starts, the artillery comes into its own. If you don't have artillery, your job is much harder. Artillery can take out mass formations of men quite quickly, and by artillery I mean siege engines. I don't know why I keep calling it artillery, but anyhow, the siege engines, as you can see here, are battering this battering ram, so it's doing quite a lot of damage. Eventually the battering ram reaches the gate, but this isn't always the case. You'll find that these siege engines do a lot of damage to all these siege equipment, support equipment that they use, and half the time an army, if you do have a lot of catapults, will end up having to come up the ladders, which is what you want them to do. So this is what you're after. You're trying to force them to use ladders. As you can see, when you're firing down at the enemy, you're using up your arrows. So it's a good thing to learn where these spare arrows can be found within the fort, your castle you're defending, because all you do is stand next to these barrels of arrows, press F, and you can restock all your arrows and keep on firing indefinitely. It's like an unlimited supply. Now the other thing you can do is when they do break through the walls or the gate, you can pick up stones and throw them down on the enemy's heads. This causes a massive amount of damage to any enemy stood below you. As you can see from this clip here, they're causing a lot of damage and I'm taking out quite a lot of men with just one rock. So when you drop multiple rocks on them, yeah, you're going to really destroy the forces. Now, don't forget, you've already got a wall of swords at the gate. As they're coming in to attack you, there's already a wall of swords hacking them down. So this is just extra damage you're causing here. It makes it very difficult to get through that gate with any force, of any size. Eventually, though, they might get through depending on how strong your troops are. If they're not very good, then you might just lose out. Now, once they do start climbing the walls and the ladders, you've got them where you want them to be. Basically, from that moment on, you're either hacking them on the walls with your swords or you're using a bow. If you're using a bow, just try and get one arrow in every man coming up the ladder. That makes it much easier for your guys to actually kill off their men when they do get to the top, because they'd already have 50 points worth of damage or something like that. The other thing to remember is when you're fighting on the walls, long weapons like two-handed swords like I'm using in this video, or something even longer, are difficult to use in close spaces. Although they cause a massive amount of damage and are quite good in a fight, a short sword in this environment might be a better choice, although it will cause far less damage, but you will be able to hit more often with it. I stick to a two-handed weapon because I like two-handed weapons. But as you can see, these knights don't really stand any chance whatsoever. They're all dying on the wall the second they appear. And that'll keep on going for quite some time until they run out of men and start to withdraw. But you can alternate between that and using your bow. And if you do take too much damage, just go back to using your bow to shoot them as they're coming up the ladder. You can see from the view from the top that there isn't much room for them to actually climb up and get onto the balcony. So this is the situation that you want them to be in, so they're crowded out of the balcony, well not balcony, the battlements. But anyway, you'll get more and more coming until they eventually run out of men. But this is how you beat a larger force, by doing this. By having them charge up the ladder, just as you're seeing in the video. So it's one by one and getting hacked to pieces by loads of your men. If you get your archers in the right position, as I have, you'll see the archers are actually doing quite a good job of taking them out as well. In some cases, you'll get a bit of a crossfire going on, which will prove deadly, completely deadly to them all. At which case, you should have a far easier time, taking them down, because they'll already be wounded before they get to the top of the wall. But don't forget, the ones that get onto the wall there, the ones that you can see that survive might need a few extra arrows just to help you guys out, because sometimes the odd one will sneak past. And don't always check behind you as well, just in case your men have got killed somewhere else and they've managed to get on the wall somewhere, because they could easily come up behind you hacking. That'd be a game over. So I do find that the scrum you would get into at the top of these ladders is actually safer than it looks, because they can't get their weapons on you any more than you can get your weapons on them. And if you do notice they do have a long-handed weapon, the best thing you can do in melee is get as close as possible to them, because while you're close, they will not be able to swing that weapon. Also, if they do, the damage will be small compared to what it's like at full range. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but those long-handed axes cause a lot of damage at the full extent of the range, but not much close in. So depending on the weapon they're using, you'd either want to be really close or much further away. Finally, they'll start running away from your castle and withdrawing. At that point, you've beaten that first wave. If it's a large army, there will be more wave of attackers, at which point you can either send in your troops or fight the same battle again. Well, not the same, there'll be less troops this time. But just be warned though, right, that you will still be wounded, although I've noticed certain battlements do seem to get repaired. And that makes the second battle a bit different. But anyway, it says when you actually get to the point where you're beating them, and they've all run away and everything else, you can literally then heal up or swap your men out with men from another castle and go on the offensive immediately, because your garrison acts as a kind of resupply of troops. So you go to another castle of yours, swap your wounded men for fresh men, go back out and take advantage of the fact you've just broken their large force on your castle walls. This is how you manage to beat large empires. Although, to be honest, in my last game, it was getting absolutely ridiculous with four factions against one, me, and they were sending 1,200 men each at me. So There's no way I could run, but that's a result of me going on the offensive constantly in order to earn the money I needed to pay for my troops. I've since figured out how to avoid that scenario by being a little bit smarter and a little bit less aggressive. But anyway, that's in another video which you might have seen already. So anyhow, there you go then. That's how you win at a siege. There's a few tips in there if you haven't noticed that in the siege games before. Maybe you haven't done them, or maybe you have your doubts, because after all, if you lose, you're captured, right? But you can, with the right weapons and the right armour, man it out on the battlements and just hack them as they come in a fairly safe manner. And you can use your bows and archery skills, to great effect as they're closing. You don't necessarily have to be a monster fight. You can order your men around, but you definitely need to help out in order for it to win. I would say just sticking one arrow each man coming up the ladder is probably one of the better things you can do. Without trying to kill them, you're just wounding them to the point where they're easier to kill at the top of the ladder. That helps a lot. You'd be surprised how much. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Hope this helps, and make sure you defend your castles.